Welcome. This is British National Party Television coming to you from Bolton in Lancashire. Now we're here today to report on the suppression by the police of legitimate protest. 7 days ago, 7,000 Muslims marched through the streets of Bolton. Many of the local residents thought this event was a deliberate expression of Muslim power and designed to take part in an ongoing process of intimidation of the local population to recognise this Muslim power and submit to it. Now, unsurprisingly, some local residents wished to protest at this event. Unfortunately, they were prevented from doing so by the police. Now, we're joined here today by one of those local residents, a Mr. Bryn Morgan. Now, Mr. Morgan, could you begin by telling our viewers why you personally wanted to take part in this protest?
Well, yes, there was a great many reasons, but to name a few, it was a blatant act of what we viewed as Islamic supremacy. With this march, they bust these people in from all over the northwest, in fact all over the country.
They were busting, they weren't local people.
There was a few obviously locals, but the Muslim community in Bolton is normally somewhat more covert rather than overt. They don't generally seek to ram it down your throat, which is what this march was all about. This was, in our view, as I say, a blatant and overt act of Islamic supremacy. We found that highly distasteful, and why the whole town should be disrupted. Again, another issue was the cost of this, where the cost of this march was being borne from. Again, we've put forward under the Freedom of Information Act a request as to where these costs were indeed put forward from. It's always been maintained that the Muslims have paid, but we believe it's the state and the taxpayer that's paying. And again, another point being that as a not deeply religious man, but as a Christian, I found it very, very distasteful that they had chosen, and I do believe it was a choice, to hold this blatant act of Islamic supremacy and to really push Islam upon the local community on the Sabbath, on a Sunday, on the Christian's day of worship. So on various levels we found it an affront to the local community, an affront to the Christian community, and certainly an affront to local taxpayers that were funding an event like this to take place. And equally so when a group of nationalists had requested a singular road closure in Bolton in order to facilitate a march and a protest that they wished to undertake in the area. Again, this was regarding the Islamification of the northwest and of Bolton as an area. The police told that group under no uncertain terms that under no circumstances would they facilitate any road closures in order to allow this to happen. And yet 7 roads were closed in Bolton to facilitate this wonderful expression by the Muslims of their supremacy in the northwest.
And what sort of protest did you intend to make? What was its character?
Just a wholly peaceful and silent protest, by our presence as white males and females, in fact, within the group, to display Union flags and St George's flags and make the statement that we were, white and British and proud of the fact, and we're not prepared to be subjugated within our own town because of this, huge number of Muslims. It was to show that we were not afraid to be out on the streets, whereas other than ourselves, the streets were deserted because people were very intimidated by this very large number of Muslims.
And were you all going to be together? Were you going to march? How were you going to?
We'd separated into smaller groups so that we could effectively line the march with smaller groups, as I say, on a wholly peaceful basis, but just really to display our distaste at what was going on and what was taking place on the day, for the reasons stated.
And how many were you in total? What sort of numbers were
there? There was
involved?
about 60 of us in total, primarily local people, although there had been some people that had come from Blackburn and Burnley and Stockport, again, to show their support, because they were aware of the fact that there was not enough people to make the right statement that were prepared to have the courage to stand up for their convictions.
And what happened on the day?
Well, it was absolutely disgraceful what happened on the day. The peaceful groups that had congregated were descended upon by members of Greater Greater Manchester Police Tactical Unit. Indeed, the group of, I think there was 8 that I was with, 2 police vans came screaming into this public car park where we were stood. I think if we'd have driven the way that they drove on the day, we'd been being arrested for reckless driving. But there we are. It's another example of what's good for those and what's good for us.
And this happened to each individual group?
This happened to each individual group. I mean, one of the groups that they'd congregated, we were in a public car park. There was another group that congregated at Morrison's car park in the town. And the police actions across the board mirrored in each instance, where they were overtly aggressive, very confrontational, looking to intimidate the members of the patriotic groups that were there. And ultimately, you know, the message was clear. And in fact, one of the officers stated that groups of white males were not going to be tolerated in the area on this day.
Even though most of you were locals and it was your area?
Yeah, even though we're, you know, Boltonians living in the town, we weren't welcome in our own hometown, because on this particular day the police were busy, as they always do, appeasing the rights and thoughts and feelings of the Muslims. We as white males on that basis were seen as an affront to their march. I think ultimately it came down to fear of our presence, bringing out the true nature of the Muslims and the cult they follow, which is a violent one.
You said they were overtly aggressive. What sort of threats did the police use?
We were threatened with immediate arrest and that they would hold us in custody for as long as they saw fit. I've yet to research exactly how long they are allowed to hold you, but it was basically laid on the line to us very, very clearly. And I'm in the process of, so far I've got 14 witness statements from fellow patriots that were there on the day, and all of the statements concur that the same terminology, phraseology and threats that were used by the police of imprisonment, being held in custody for as long as they saw fit to avoid a breach of the peace.
Now, you're obviously quite conversant with the law on arrest, but it might interest you to know, and I think it could interest some of the viewers to know, that the BNP has compiled a leaflet which can be downloaded from our website, and this explains the sort of rights that you're entitled to if you are arrested by the police, and what sort of what would be a recommended response towards police aggression. Now, I'd like to ask you, why do you think the police responded with such speed and aggression to a counter-protest? After all, it is quite common when one group stages a march or a protest that a counter-march or a counter-protest is held. Say if somebody holds a protest in favour of same-sex marriage, one can be almost guaranteed that there will be a counter-protest for those who are against same-sex marriage. And in the BNP we're aware that it's quite common, it's almost guaranteed, that if we hold a protest, some pro-government, pro-Muslim group will hold a counter-protest. So why do you think the police are so overtly aggressive in suppressing counter-protests when it comes to Muslims?
I think ultimately the simple answer is fear. The police, in my estimation and the estimations of many I'm sure, are merely puppets of the state, and the state and their puppets in the form of the police force are, for whatever reason, terrified of the Muslims, terrified of being referred to as racist or being seen as anything other than this wonderful liberal society promoting multiculturalism. It comes down to fear of the Muslims' response. I mean, they have proven themselves to be aggressive and violent in both their, the placards that they'll display, behead the infidel, kill those that insult Allah, and so on and so forth.
So you think the police are frightened not so much of what you will do, but what will happen if you protest and what the Muslims will do? Is that what you're saying?
I think absolutely. I think the police and the government see the white British patriot as being a minority, which indeed we're not, and they see us as being the easy target and the easy victim. They're constantly looking to label. In fact, on the day, the officers in question tried to label us as English Defence League, And I said, we're not English Defence League, we're just like-minded patriots. And they really pushed the issue of, well, what group are you affiliated to? And in the end, my response was a slightly whimsical one of, I'm a member of the group Bryn Morgan, which didn't go down, wasn't greatly received from them. But they're seeking to label everybody in this right-wing minority group and consequently discredit your actions. Anything that's anti-Muslim or anything that merely raises awareness about this 7th century barbaric cult that they follow is considered racist. But as I've made the point to many people on many occasions, Islam is not made up of purely one race. It's made up of black, brown, yellow, white, every creed, colour and denomination under the sun. They are not a race, ergo one cannot be racist by opposing Islam and opposing Muslims. But it is the race card, which is why the government have brought forward in recent times this the religious hatred as well as racial hatred aspect of things. It's very easy to discredit somebody, to label them a racist or a bigot or a fascist, which is, again, there are many different arguments over what is denoted as being fascism. Scholars and academics over the years have debated this one uphill and down dale, but ultimately I would say that the actions of the state in implementing the police and the police's actions on the day in question was indeed tantamount to fascism. It was the oppression of free will through violence, intimidation and threat, which by anyone's standards is a fair estimation to
and you
link
think
that
and
as
you
fascist
think
action.
and you think they were picking on the easy target, the people who were least likely to be violent or respond violently.
Absolutely. Plus, we don't have the race card to play or the religious card to play. We are a minority because we dare to be white British Christians in our own country. We dare to be taxpayers. We dare not to be an immigrant from Sudan or Pakistan or Bangladesh or wherever else, and consequently we seemingly don't have the same rights now under British law for this, for the freedom of movement, freedom of protest, freedom to express oneself. All of these aspects have been removed from us, but for hate preachers like Anjem Choudhury that can stand in the city of London, other extremists that will stand there and burn the poppy, which has been symbolic for many, many years of the courage and the sacrifice by the members of the armed forces in all conflicts over the centuries, dating back to the fields of Flanders in the First World War. They can desecrate that memory, they can desecrate that honour, they can desecrate those people through burning a poppy. And I think the last perpetrator of such a heinous disrespect was given a £50 fine for his actions. If I was to stand in Bolton Central today and burn the Quran, I would be inciting racial hatred, religious hatred.
You'd be in prison.
I would be imprisoned. In fact, yes, you're absolutely spot on. So there is this wonderful two-tier system which this very ultra-liberal government have sought to project upon us all. But what they're failing to realise is, these are their actions, and these actions are undermining the very fabric of democracy that they're alleging to stand for. In actuality, we no longer live in a democracy, we live in a totalitarian regime governed by Muslims, seemingly.
And where do you propose to take it from here, or are you going to do as the police want and just walk away?
No, certainly not. No, I mean the police's actions are something that I'm very familiar with, and I've seen numerous other individuals subject to the same sort of oppression and aggression from the police force. My response to it is a simple and honest response in going to the Independent Police Complaints Authority. There's a formal complaint going forward against all officers concerned on the day. I contacted an MEP. The MEP in question happened to be the chairman of the British National Party, Nick Griffin, who's very kindly given me a lot of support, help and advised me. My first gut instinct, because all the paedophiles, rapists and Muslims all run to the European Court of Human Rights whenever they feel their rights have been infringed, probably guilty of listening to too much media, I perceived that my first recourse for my human rights having been infringed, and indeed it's not speculation or conjecture, it was Articles 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act were clearly infringed, in fact trampled all over under the jackboots of Greater Manchester Police. So I believe that European Court of Human Rights was the way forward to take my case of my human rights having been infringed. Mr Griffin has very kindly advised me that the first port of call is to actually exhaust the judiciary within within the United Kingdom. So we are going to request a judicial review of the police's actions on the day. Formal complaint going through to the IPCC. As I said earlier, I think we've got numerous statements. In total, we will have 60 statements which all concur the police's actions on the day were wholly and overtly aggressive, intimidating, and we were in fear of our liberty.
And basically illegal.
Absolutely illegal, yeah. The actions were illegal, but it's merely now a case of going through the process for somebody to recognise that the actions of the police were wholly illegal. But this is becoming more and more and more prevalent. If a left-wing group, if the Unite Against Fascism group, who are borderline terrorists, if they wish to protest, they are allowed to run amok. If any faction against the state, against the left or against the Muslims comes out and they wish to express themselves, they are trampled all over. And I think there's a clear message that goes forward here. Whether your political beliefs are left, centre or right, we all, I hope, believe in the idea and the ideals of a democracy. The idea of suppression of the right to protest, the suppression of free speech, these are all things which surely the left, the centre, the right will all, and for once can agree on, is something that is wholly unacceptable and undermines the very fabric of a democracy that, again, leading back to the desecration of the poppies, we had a generation of young men that fought and died to uphold what the politicians now call a democracy. Well, I'm afraid my estimation, the estimation of many white British people, has become that people like David Cameron and Blair before him are nothing but traitors.
Well, I've got to say, Mr. Morgan, I don't think if the police's intention was to suppress you, they've clearly failed.
They have indeed.
And I think our viewers, and certainly myself, find it heartwarming to know that there are people like Mr. Morgan who have the courage and strength of character to stand up to Islamic aggression and state oppression. Thank you very much for listening.